They say a smile can hide 1,000 battles. And if you look closely at Pope Francis, behind that familiar gentle smile, you will find a story not often told. A story of quiet storms, of battles fought in silence, of wounds carried beneath the white robes of the papacy. The world knows him as the people's pope, a beacon of humility, compassion, and reform. Yet beneath that light, there were shadows he wrestled with alone. Scandals he inherited but could not easily heal. Words he spoke with love but sometimes misstepped. Dreams he carried and compromises that weighed on his spirit. Because leadership, even at its highest, is never without cost, and sainthood is never born from ease. Today we take a deeper look, not to judge, but to understand. Behind the accolades, behind the criticism, behind the gentle smile, was a man who struggled, hoped, and ultimately remained profoundly human. This is the hidden story of Pope Francis, as you've rarely seen before. When Pope Francis stepped into the papacy, he inherited a church battered by scandals. But the weight of that legacy would soon test him in ways no one could have foreseen. In 2014, a decision that would haunt him was made. Mauro Inzoli, a priest convicted of heinous crimes against children, was spared the full force of punishment. Instead of permanent removal, he was sentenced to a life of prayer and penance, a leniency that later proved catastrophic when Inzoli reoffended and was imprisoned by civil authorities. The world watched, the faithful questioned, how could mercy be granted at the cost of justice? Then came Chile, 2018. Facing mounting accusations against Bishop Juan Barros for covering up abuse, Pope Francis initially stood firm, defending Barros publicly. It sparked outrage, it reopened wounds, and it shook the Church's fragile trust. Only after intense backlash did Francis admit grave mistakes. He accepted resignations, he began reforms. But the scars remained, and looming larger still was the case of Theodore McCarrick, a powerful cardinal whose abuses had long been whispered and, some allege, long been known. Francis ultimately defrocked McCarrick in 2019, but for many, the question lingered: why did it take so long? Leadership is not only about mercy, it is also about the courage to confront darkness swiftly. Pope Francis showed both, but not always at the right time. In his struggle to balance compassion and accountability, he revealed something profoundly human. Even the most compassionate hearts can falter under impossible burdens, and still, the journey to heal continues. Among Pope Francis's greatest challenges was navigating the Church's relationship with the LGBTQ+ community. He began his papacy with words that sparked hope. Who am I to judge? For many, it was a breath of fresh air, a signal of compassion, of understanding. But in the years that followed, the journey proved far more complicated. In May 2024, during a private meeting with Italian bishops, Francis used a term considered offensive towards gay men. The backlash was immediate. Headlines blazed. Communities once filled with cautious hope felt a painful sting. And yet, Pope Francis did not retreat into silence. He apologized, he clarified, he reaffirmed his commitment to dignity for all, because to him, humanity always came before perfection. Beyond words, there were actions. At the Vatican, he welcomed a group of transgender women, many marginalized and rejected by society. He offered them kindness, he offered them respect, seats of honor at public audiences, access to health care. In these gestures, he lived the gospel he preached. Still, contradictions lingered. Within the sprawling halls of the Church, acceptance clashed with tradition. Progress whispered, but resistance roared louder in some corners. Pope Francis walked a tightrope, not always perfectly, not without missteps, but with a heart stubbornly open. Because real change is not a straight road. It is a journey marked by courage, apology, and the unyielding belief that every soul deserves to be seen. And in that belief, Pope Francis carved a fragile but enduring bridge, one step at a time. Leadership is rarely a path of ease. For Pope Francis, it meant walking a narrow bridge, suspended between ancient tradition and the winds of change. From the moment he spoke of mercy over judgment, of inclusion over exclusion, he stirred both hope and fierce resistance within the church he loved. Conservative voices rose, some quietly, others loudly. They accused him of diluting doctrine, of bending the timeless truths too far. Every step toward opening doors for women, every outreach to the LGBTQ+ community was met with applause by some and alarm by others. Inside the marble halls of the Vatican, tensions simmered, not in public outcries, but in quiet papers, in sharp letters, in withdrawn support. Francis pressed on, not to tear down tradition, but to breathe new life into it. Still, he bore the wounds of every unseen battle. Critics once loyal grew distant, friends became cautious. It is a lonely thing to hold the past in one hand and the future in the other, a tightrope stretched across centuries, swaying with every gust of fear, of hope, of longing for something more. Pope Francis knew no bridge is built without resistance, no heart is changed without tension. And so, he chose to walk that fragile bridge anyway, one careful, stubborn, faithful step at a time. In 2024, Pope Francis opened a new window into his soul with the release of his memoir, Hope. It was a book filled with dreams, with reflections on mercy, humility, and the power of love to transform the world. In its pages, he spoke of a childhood shaped by faith, of a vocation born from quiet prayer, of a lifelong longing to lift the forgotten. His words carried the warmth of a shepherd's heart, a tenderness few world leaders ever dared to show. But for some readers, something was missing. Hope illuminated many things, yet it cast shadows over others. The memoir touched lightly, too lightly some said, on the church's deepest wounds, the pain of abuse scandals, the cries of those unheard. Critics asked, could true hope exist without reckoning, without facing fully the broken places? Perhaps Pope Francis believed that focusing on dreams would better heal the cracks. That vision could lead where confrontation had failed. Perhaps he simply chose hope over despair. But in choosing, he revealed a truth about leadership that few dare admit. Every light we carry forward also casts a shadow behind us. And sometimes, even the most compassionate leaders cannot fully escape the blind spots of their own humanity. Hope endures, but so does the work still unfinished. Beneath the white robes, beyond the towering balconies of St. Peter's Square, there was always a man. A man who smiled with kindness but wrestled with unseen storms. A man who carried both courage and contradiction, vision and blind spots, hope and heartbreak. Pope Francis never claimed perfection. He never wrapped himself in infallibility. Instead, he invited the world into a different kind of leadership, one defined not by unshakable certainty, but by the trembling strength of a human heart trying to love in a complicated world. His struggles remind us, compassion is not a shield against failure, hope does not erase mistakes, faith does not exempt us from wrestling with doubt. And maybe that's the deeper miracle, not a leader who soared above humanity, but one who stayed deeply rooted within it. In Pope Francis, we see a reflection of ourselves, trying, falling, getting up, and trying again. He reminds us that true greatness is not in flawless leadership, but in relentless compassion, and that the most enduring bridges we build are not monuments of stone, but quiet acts of love stitched together, one fragile step at a time. Behind the gentle smile, behind the mighty title, was simply a man who dared to lead with a wounded heart, and taught us that sometimes that is the strongest leadership of all. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough.